Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Dream, and you're here for another exciting episode of Psychedelics as Medicine under the banner of the It's All Good show. Today's guest is someone that I met a couple of years ago, and we met her in Florida when we were doing an event, and her book was just coming out at that time. And we were just, we're off the road right now for a bit. And we were going through some papers and everything. And Stephanie said, "Oh, look, do you remember Gay Lynn? We should contact her, see if she wants to be on Psychedelics as Medicine." And I did. And she ever so graciously accepted. Let me give you a little idea of who she is. She is a dynamic speaker, educator, therapist, and author known for her ability to bridge science, spirit, and story in ways that inspire transformation. With a background in clinical psychology, education, and spiritual leadership, she offers a holistic and empowering approach to healing and personal growth. Gay Lynn combines traditional psychotherapy with cutting-edge treatments like ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. Her work supports individuals navigating life's transitions, trauma, and emotional challenges, helping them reconnect with their inner wisdom and strength. Her compassionate, client-centered style empowers people to become active participants in their own healing. Now, she is the author of a book that I have found fascinating, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals. It's a groundbreaking guide that weaves together therapeutic insights and spiritual practices to help individuals explore consciousness, meaning, and self-discovery. Her gift for storytelling allows her to connect deeply with audiences, turning complex ideas into accessible, transformative experiences. And this is very much like a guidebook, really. And so, Gay Lynn, welcome to Psychedelics as Medicine on the It's All Good show. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dream. And you see, I have your name right in the title of the book because dreams are how appropriate, right? Dreams are that way that we can also access those non-ordinary states of consciousness that psychedelics help us to achieve as well. Beautiful introduction. Thank you. I'm humbled and joyful to be a part of your show. And also, thank you for the wonderful Tibetan bowl that I use almost every single ceremony that I do. And it's the one for the heart chakra. And people love that bowl. It's such a gift. Thank you for traveling around the country. Thank you for sharing that with us all, and that your healing medicine resonates in so many places every single day. And I hope you know that. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And when we met, I didn't have this podcast, hadn't launched all of this. This just launched a year ago. Certainly when we met, I was an experienced psychonaut and researcher, and facilitating healing in my own field and process and everything like that. And so I was fascinated with your work at the time, but now having launched Psychedelics as Medicine and the DMT Chronicles and all of this that I'm putting out there, I'm even more excited to have met you in person. I love that you're using the bowl, and that's just makes my day. Um, Give us a little bit of background. How does let's just go. How did you find yourself in this arena? I mean, it is not it's becoming more mainstream, but certainly you've been traversing these realms for longer than that when it was not
Yes.
mainstream at all. So give us an idea of what drew you in and kind of how that process has worked for you. How'd you find yourself here?
Well, that's it. I love that question because it really brings me to um, a, a, a point in my life that was pivotal, and that was being 16. Now, all of us have had that pivotal moment, when you're 16 and you're exploring and you're wondering and you're curious and you're thinking, there must be more. And so at 16 years old, for my 16-year-old birthday, a friend of mine gave me a one small purple microdot of LSD at 16 on my birthday. I took that purple microdot of LSD and I went to school, which is a story in and of itself. But the overall arching experience was exceptional. Now, not every 16-year-old is prepared for that, and not every 16-year-old will have an exceptional experience. I think that in some way I was being prepared in a long range goal that eventually would evolve and show itself. And so that 16-year-old me that had that experience understood, not just from a kind of a thinking perspective, that there are more dimensions than this dimension, and that we can go to other dimensions, receive insight and information, have an experience of some power greater than ourselves, which I had a foundation of, kind of spiritually already, even as a 16-year-old. But this was the experience of a power greater than myself. And so once tapping into that, I was just enthralled. And so, unfortunately, on that day, or fortunately, as fate would have it, I also got caught for doing LSD by my English teacher, who was not exactly thrilled about the idea that, I was tripping in his classroom. So he made a deal with me. He said, look, you know, if you will write for the yearbook and really kind of capture some of what my experience was, that's the deal. Okay. And you I won't turn you in. I was like, deal. Great idea. And unintentionally, and this is what the wild part is, he became my first integration coach. Do you understand? Because that is what actually set me on this path of writing and journaling and putting my experiences into writing. And that has changed everything. So, obviously, if you're kind of thinking historically, and, at that time, we were in the early 70s. And it got really dicey to do any kind of drugs. There was a war on drugs. There were people getting arrested, people being put in jail, teenagers being put in jail. I was not, I was smart enough to know my limits. And so I had to put it away for a while. And I did, I put it away. I didn't revisit that. I recognized that, it was an experience that I had. I held it very dear to my heart. But as the years went by, I had to take another path. And interestingly enough, the path that I took is the dream path. Do you understand? Because the dreams also open us up dimensionally. So I think perhaps in some way, pairing this psychedelic experience in non-ordinary states with the dream experience in non-ordinary states. And obviously now we're finding out that probably the people that have written the most on dreams, maybe Freud and Jung, they might have been experiencing some of these non-ordinary states of consciousness as well. And it enhanced their dream experience. And they could talk about that. They could talk about how do we access the deep self, the divine self, how do we access different realms, different dimensions. And so the dream path became very rich and full. And then I combined that with ritual and ceremony because, again, you need some integration. So that's a kind of brief overview, but it does tell you that early on, I had a positive experience and that influenced the rest of my journey.
I really love this. Now, before we move into the book and all these other areas, I do have a question to ask. In my own experience, it was around 16 was my first psychedelic experience, and then I kind of kept everything under wraps, in life, and it became a big part of my life that I didn't actually share with people. So in the business world, and then when I moved into being a public speaker, and then the sound healing and all of this, didn't talk about it. And I would say it's in the last 5 or so years that I've started putting it out there. I didn't want to be known as like, oh, Dr. Dream, the druggie, or anything like that. Did you deal with any of that? Like the kind of the stigma that the psychedelics brought with it at a certain time?
I'm dealing with the stigma that psychedelics bring with it today. So it's not we're still not there yet. But
Wow.
we're way closer than we have been historically. I think it's really interesting. My journey took me through a licensed mental health counselor pathway. So I became a licensed mental health counselor that used dreams and ritual and ceremony for transformation. And so um, that pathway was acceptable, right? And the spiritual pathway, I have 30 years experience in drug and alcohol rehabilitation with working with people who have addictions. And of course, addictions are, in my definition that I use, spiritual bankruptcy. And so, how do we reconnect to that spirit that is within us? And so, drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers I worked in, I used dream and ritual and ceremony, and they loved it, because it could tap them into something greater than themselves. We can talk about a power greater than ourselves, but how do you experience that? And then the American Psychological Association, which I've been a member of for uh, 30 years, started in as a student practitioner. They started floating articles in the back of the APA Monitor, the magazine, about psychedelic research. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I was encouraged by that. And at that time, I wanted more training. So MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, was taking applications for its program that it was offering. And there were thousands of applications that went in, and you had to meet certain criteria, and you had to write why and how you were going to utilize this. And then they reviewed all the applications, and by the grace of the universe and of God, I was selected as one of the 500. And this was a huge class, international, online, the best teachers in the world. And so I was trained and certified as a MAPS therapist. And so that was like an inroad for me. And then I started traveling internationally to go to the conferences, like the International Conference on Psychedelic Research, the ICPR, that's in the Netherlands. I went to the Netherlands right after that, and I studied in the Netherlands. All the best teachers again that you could possibly meet. Paul Stamets, Dr. David Nutt, obviously Rick Doblin was there, and he was, featured, as well as Amanda Fielding, and researchers and scientists and doctors, and how they were all evolving and using this. And of course, Europe is a bit ahead of us, so it gave me that experience in Europe, in the Netherlands, to kind of get the vision of what was going to be coming into eventually the United States, because we're pretty far behind in some of this. So at the time, Rick Doblin said, we need 20,000 therapists trained immediately in order to this get rolled out, but isn't just rolled out and flops because nobody knows what they're doing, but it needs to be rolled out with some educational component to it, from people who know how to do this. And that was part of my motivation to write, the psychedelic dreams and rituals, because I had had the experience of being able to do it with so many people, because I was MAPS trained. I got a position in a clinic right away. They wanted to increase their viability of doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy, which is the only thing that was legal in my state. But don't underestimate ketamine. It's not for everybody, but don't underestimate it. It can be incredibly effective. And so I had, hundreds of ceremonies, hundreds of groups that I had helped to facilitate. And out of that came psychedelic dreams and rituals, along with my past 30-year experience. And it's a guidebook, and it's for facilitators. I didn't just write it for therapists. I wanted, because I don't think it's only going to be therapists doing this.
Right.
It's going to be facilitators who have training and can hold space and do it ethically and do it with consciousness. So that's kind of the genesis of where the seed of psychedelic streams and rituals came from. The from Maps and Rick Doblin in the Netherlands. And I wrote the book 2 years ago, and I have trained, literally thousands with the book up to this point. And what I did recently, a college here in Florida has a senior learning program. I taught it to seniors. And that was epic, because when our grandmas can start talking about psychedelics, then we know we've crossed a threshold that it has taken root at a deeper level, because then it's gotten normalized to the point of, grandma saying, "Did you ever hear about these psychedelics? Like, it's kind of interesting what can happen with these. I mean, did you ever think about that son or grandson or granddaughter or daughter?" So we've hit that threshold now. But there has been bias and prejudice and toward me, because I work with psychedelic medicine. And as I say, I only work legally. I only work above ground, not underground. Although with the underground, deepest, gratitude, because we've learned from the underground how to do what we do above ground. And so I have the deepest appreciation and gratitude toward the underground.
So allow me to ask, give us an idea of when, at least in your practice, it became acceptable and legal for you to integrate the psychedelics as medicine.
Well, the ketamine has been approved in pretty much across the United States to be used what they call off label. So, if it's used in the way that it's traditionally used, it's an anesthetic. But used off label at lower doses, it becomes a psycholytic dose, which means that, you have that sense of the ego not having as much sway, and you can go into a little bit of that. And that's what people need to be prepared for, because once you start lifting out of your body to a certain degree, once you start feeling like what you thought you were, you're not anymore, that can be a little bit dysregulating. Like, oh my gosh, I'm, if I don't have if I don't have this mind, if I don't have this, whatever we think we are, this persona, who am I? Which is exactly what the psychedelic medicine does at its best. It kind of helps us to ask those bigger existential questions. Who am I? You know, Beyond this, form, which then puts us on a path of spiritual awakening.
So I'm very interested in, excuse me, some of the basics of how you're facilitating the ketamine therapy. Is it through IV?
So there's two models, the medical model and the therapeutic model. In the medical model, they're using the IV because it's a medicine that's being administered, and it's strictly a medicinal medicine, intravenous. It's not therapeutic. It's just, you go into a room, you're made to feel comfortable, and the IV is started, and you may or may not have somebody in there with you if you bring somebody with you, and that's the medical model. And remember, ketamine is really effective for people who have depression that they haven't been able to break through, long held depression, treatment resistant depression. And so some need that, kind of medicine to kind of snap them a bit out of that, treatment resistant depression. That's the medical model. And it can help with pain relief and a multitude of other things. That's not the model I'm using. I use a therapeutic model. And in the therapeutic model, I use troches or lozenges. And so they're administered sublingually, and and the question is, well, how do you get these? I don't prescribe them. The model that I'm using, I have a practitioner that I work with. You do a medical eval with the practitioner. The practitioner determines, Doctor ARNP, determines your eligibility, if ketamine is advisable, if there are any health conditions that may make you not a good candidate for this. Then they prescribe them just like they prescribe any other medication. It's sent to a pharmacy. This pharmacy is a compound pharmacy. They create the troches, and then you can pick them up, or they're mailed to your home. And then you bring that package to me in our session together. We've already done preparation sessions, because I think just doing the medicine itself isn't really, the medicine is a catalyst. All right. So if the medicine is a catalyst, what do we want it to be a catalyst for? And we want it to be a catalyst for your healing. So we have to know, what is it that needs healing? What is it that needs to be kind of looked at? And it's not an easy process. It's like a wound that's been, festered over and kind of, infected. And so we have to open up those wounds. We have to clean out those wounds. It might be mental, emotional, physical trauma, mental trauma, PTSD. I work with veterans. I work with first responders, and I work with people in recovery. I work with people who've had extensive, complicated traumas, that multiple traumas. And so, the ketamine is a catalyst for that healing process. So once we've determined what we're working on, we set intention. Set and setting is important. I have a private office that is just my office, nobody else in the office. And we do the ceremony, we do the medicine session, and I do it very ceremonially. I'm using the music, I'm using the lighting, I'm using the mask. We're going in to do the inner journey. I'm using the Tibetan bowl to bring the vibration of love and healing into this session. And then they do the session, and I write down everything that they say as much as I possibly can to capture it, and then reintegrate it after the session's over. So perhaps during the session, maybe they had an experience with their higher power. Maybe they had an experience with, mom or dad. It's like a dream realm. So you enter into this dream realm, but you're conscious. It's like having an in-life dream experience, an in vivo dream experience. You're conscious of it. You understand you're dreaming. You're in the experience, and you can talk about it. And so I'm using a very low dose that still makes it possible for you to share some of your experience of what you're going through. And then we'll use that to weave back in for your healing. And it's been incredibly effective.
Now, are there different doses for different people, or is everyone doing the same dose?
Nope. Everybody's dose would be modified. Some of it's milligram to kilogram, depending on body size. But some people if they're highly affected by medications that they might take, you would do a lower dose. I think I kind of lean in toward the European model, versus the American model for doses. The American model for doses is like give them the sledgehammer, like the mega dose and and for some people, I think it can be effective. I lean into more of the European way of dosing, where start small, get them used to it, and stair step them out farther and farther each time, rather than just sending them into the stratosphere right from the get-go. So, and I'll modify that depending on the person. If someone's had a lot of experience and they're used to traveling on the inner dimensions, and they don't have a fear of their ego death, and they're not just in flight or fight or control mode. I might tend to lean toward a higher dose because they know how to navigate their inner world. And a lot of people just don't. They don't know how to navigate their own inner world. And that is the conundrum that we're in right now, is that people don't know how to regulate themselves emotionally, mentally, because they're not used to navigating their own inner world and creating grounding and centering inside themselves. They're still looking for it outside, and it's not there, it's inside. And so we establish that first, the grounding first. So when they go in, I can go back to that grounding that we established.
So, in in my own experience, ketamine wasn't on the upper portion of the list of what I was researching and experiencing as I was going through my own process and healing and ceremonies. It has since become a very important medicine for us. Uh, how did that work for you? And then what role has ketamine played in your own process? I imagine. I mean, I know you don't do the medicine when the clients are doing the medicine, um,
Correct.
but talk to us a little bit about your own relationship with ketamine.
So, obviously, because uh, I was doing the ketamine, that was going to be important for me to get fully trained. And I was fortunate to have some exceptional teachers that have ketamine clinics in North Carolina, and I took their training so that I could know step by step clinically. Um, and how to create safety and what protocols to put in place and how to make the experience as effective as possible. Then I was working with a ketamine clinic in Ocala, Florida, where I live, and that was another deepening of my own experience. And that's where I started. While they were doing the IV therapies, I did all of the ketamine routes of administration so I could know exactly what they were experiencing, because some of my clients were doing the IV therapy, but then they were doing the therapeutic portion with me. So I've done the IV ketamine, I've done the intramuscular ketamine, I've done the lozenges. In Europe and the Netherlands, the ketamine is more of nasal, which never appealed to me. So that I have not done as a route of administration. But ketamine is so flexible. I've even heard that people can put them into suppositories. So, I mean, ketamine is incredibly versatile. I just thought that was humorous. So, so I've practice in terms of helping myself to learn how to navigate that particular medicine. And in my experience, when I was in the Netherlands, I could ride my bike to the store and buy psilocybin. I mean, that was wonderful. I just got on my bike, rode to the store, and I'm going in to buy my psilocybin. And there's a variety of types of, magic mushrooms that you could get that had various. And so I did a lot of experimenting and traveling and doing journeys with my friends in the Netherlands so I could have that experience. I also had some experiences with MDMA there. So that it deepened my own knowledge. of a variety of kinds of medicines. And I've already had the LSD experience, so that was rich. So I keep building experientially on each of these. The ketamine I found to be an easy step into the world of psychedelic medicines. It's not classically thought of as a psychedelic, but it does have those components. And for some, if it's their very first time, I think it's a gentler tiptoe into the pond rather than, you know, full-fledged, headfirst into the pool off the diving board. And I find that ketamine is very effective for that. And it's super effective to use therapeutically because you're still present. If
Right.
I love psilocybin, I think that would probably be my go-to, but psilocybin takes many more hours, where ketamine, I could do a ketamine session easily in 3 hours, but I set aside 4 just to make sure we have lots of time. If I'm doing a psilocybin, which I don't do because I can't yet, it's not legal, but those sessions take, it could take 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. You would actually need a full day. And sometimes you're not as able to kind of do the therapeutic portion of it with the psilocybin until after the journey. But I do find, I think my favorite of all the psychedelic medicines, for a variety of reasons that we can talk about, is the psilocybin.
And so in Florida right now, is ketamine the only psychedelic that is legal as medicine?
That's correct. And I also will meet with people and work therapeutically with cannabis. If they have a medical marijuana card, cannabis can be very effective because it lowers that threshold of anxiety. They kind of able to relax. They open up a little bit more. So cannabis is also very viable, although it doesn't have that quote unquote psychedelic effect. It does have that kind of opening effect to see yourself and see your inner world and see the world around you a little bit differently. And at best, that's what psychedelics do. It's like giving you the permission to kind of come out of your body just a little bit so that you can get a bird's eye view and see the whole picture of your life instead of just this tiny view that we get as we're in this day-to-day interaction, where we only get a very small bandwidth of what really is happening.
So let's jump into the book, Psychedelics, Dreams, and Rituals. And you very clearly break it into 3 areas, and yet they interweave themselves. So speak to us about that, the differences and how they all work together.
Sure. I call it the triune pathway because it's a, there's I weave in some metaphors and scriptures around this as well. There's a scripture that said a 3 strands woven together are much stronger than just one strand alone. So if you can think of the psychedelics, dreams, and rituals as being those 3 strands, to make this a stronger connection to our healing. And obviously, a part of this, what we're getting to, is a spiritual healing. It's healing our sense of separation, because that's where that hole in the soul and that longing and emptiness come from. We feel disconnected. And so in the triune pathway, it's utilizing, it preps the first 50 pages. And for anyone that is doing any of the psychedelic medicines, or wanting to do them, or learn how to facilitate them at the very best possible, this is a very inexpensive way to get a lot of training, because the first 50 pages is just a guidebook to prep you to do a successful journey. And so for $20, you can help yourself. It's cheaper than anything, any part of this process, probably. You can help yourself and there's questions that are asked, and ways that you can set yourself up for success, so that when you utilize the psychedelics, you're getting the optimal effectiveness out of them. And then it talks about integration and how do you do the integration piece. And part of the integration can be a ritual as well. I think ritual then takes what happens in our inner world and it anchors it and grounds it in the world here. So perhaps I burn something, or I baptize myself by a river or stream, or I plant something, or I write something and bury it, whatever that is, that kind of ritualizes. Usually it involves the elements in some way, fire, water, earth, how do you bring this into then this, and the same is true for dreams. How do I then make it manifest in from within me now into the world? So, for example, if I had a dream of someone that maybe I was having a difficult time with, and we were in this struggle and anger and upset, and you know, I could write. I could, perhaps this person shows up in my ceremony and in my, and always when people like that show up in our ceremonies, or they show up and it's like, oh, not this person. I have to deal with them in my ceremony. Like, what the heck? And they the people that irritate us and frustrate us and anger us the most, those are the people that are our teachers.
Right.
And so, if you can kind of reframe that slightly and go, oh, your teacher has showed up. What is this teacher helping you to understand about yourself? And then, kind of process through that a little bit. Maybe this person is just helping me to learn patience, and I'm really struggling with patience and my relationship with time. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people who are really stressed because they have an ineffective relationship with time. Time. Time is something we make up. It's not even real.
Right.
We've just, I mean, it's like I made up this crazy thing called time, and now I'm driving myself crazy with time and impatience. It's like, what? So, and so then maybe, I mean, this sounds kind of funny, but I mean, years ago, I did struggle with this myself, my own relationship with time, and I was impatient. So at the time, my husband planted impatience all along the walkway, coming in and out of the house. It was like a little ritual. It was like, okay, remember, patience, patience. So coming in, going out of the house, patience. So that's like a little ritual or ceremony to remind me, remind us, remind one another of, what it is that we're working on.
It's, I just have to, I'm 40 plus years for me where psychedelics have played a huge role in my life. Um, and I picked up your book. Actually, you can I went to your website and you can download the first however many pages of the book. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I said to you, I'm glad you gave me a week or so before we booked the interview, because I've just ordered the book off Amazon. It's going to be here in a couple of days. Um, super impressed.
Thank
Super
you.
impressed with the buildup, with the setting the tone of, here are the questions, and here are things to look at, and here's a framework to prepare you. So, I mean, certainly it's an amazing guidebook, and it, as you say, it can be for anyone. I mean, I imagine I'm not a therapist. I did at one point facilitate journeys. That's a whole long story. But now we don't. We've been asked to do sound healing for people while they're having a psilocybin experience, and we've said no. We're going to kind of stay away from that. Um, and really for us, the psychedelic experience for my wife and I, Stephanie, has been reserved for our own growth and connection and everything along those lines. But this book is just it literally, I mean, you didn't overstate it, before when you were talking about it. it is an absolute necessity for anyone that is in just about any aspect of the experience. And I remember even as a recreational user, which I laugh at that, even that phraseology around it, because the last thing that, I mean, at some point it becomes medicine, even if you're doing it recreationally. Many of us got started, and it's festivals and it's all these things going on around us, but at some point there's a processing that needs to take place, and an integration that is so incredibly important. um like right now, I'm part of a planning group for a festival in Iceland for the total solar eclipse
Mm.
next August. And we're talking about, oh, well, what can we do? And I said, well, people are going to be doing a lot of medicines, and even the total solar eclipse itself as an experience is a medicine. And
Yes.
I stated that my experience with medicines is that you are like, one, for me, basically one of two things, or a combination of both these happen. And that is, you're letting go and releasing, and then you're attaching yourself to what you would like to expand in your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're coming up with these stations, as it were, in Iceland, where at certain times of the day, it'll be, go there and process and integrate the letting go and releasing. And then at other times, it'll be go there and process, what am I attaching myself to? What am I consciously choosing to expand in my life? But it's as the discussion around psychedelics broadens for our culture, and hearing what you did with the seniors, absolutely love it. I think that's the greatest thing. And it's just, everything's becoming so much more acceptable as there are then studies around this or that. I know that Stephanie and I carve out one night a week or one night every 2 weeks for what we call kind of a psychedelic date night. And it's just the two of us in our
Mm-hmm.
sacred space, working with one or one of the medicines, or a combination at times. And going through a process. We've really um attached ourselves a bit recently to ketamine. It's not something that again, it wasn't really on my list before. The more heavier experiences from psychedelics, psilocybin and LSD and DMT has been a huge medicine for me for years and years and years, like over 25 years. Um, but what we really like about the ketamine is we can be back to baseline in 3 hours. So we
Yes.
can have an experience, and then we can be back to where we started 3 hours later. It's not like, okay,
Yes.
LSD, by tomorrow morning, I'm sure I'm going to be feeling, almost back to baseline. And psilocybin, 6, 7 hours or more, depending on how you're handling it. But we found that the ketamine has been really a valuable one for us, and we'll do a small. It's all for us nasal use, and we'll do a small amount. And we go through a process where we're talking and we're discussing. It just brings the walls down, and we're not
Mm-hmm.
attached to the ego forcing anything. It's like the ego gets sidelined, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, let's talk about this project that we've been so focused on, and let's look at different aspects of it. And I've just found it so incredibly helpful. And then we'll re-up a little bit, turn up the music, do some lights, and whatever in our space is very psychedelic to start with, and kind of go for the deeper dive. But it's been I'm just going off on tangents, but I think I'm bringing it back. Uh, the book, I mean, it's made me realize that I could easily with your guidance in this book, be a facilitator, based on
Yeah.
all of my experiences, all of my knowledge and everything else. And then the foundational guidance, really to me, the word that keeps coming up is framework that it
Yes, that's
gives.
it.
And it's just like, okay. And I don't believe it's something I really want to step into, but I believe that even if you're a casual experiencer, a casual psychonaut, as it were, whatever you want to
Hmm.
call yourself, there's great value in this. Now, I'm very interested in the because of my own experience, the ketamine couples therapy that you do. Speak to us a little bit about that as opposed to working with the person solo.
I think you just described it so beautifully. And it is that the couple would use the ketamine we'd start with a session, obviously, the intro session and kind of get a sense of what they both wanted to work on. And there's different ways you can do this. I prefer to have each of the partners take the dose, whatever we decide is the dose for that person, together, and then kind of experience that journey simultaneously, and then kind of bring it back, like you said, into that you are already doing yourselves, into that realm of what is it that we're kind of focused on together as a couple, what is creatively emerging for us in our lives, where are some places where maybe we feel a little bit stuck and we want to move through them a little bit more effectively. Let's get beyond our egos and really see what that could look like from a fresh perspective. And all of this really enhances the ability to have a fresh perspective. It's like looking with new lenses of perception. It's the same person, the same situation, but the ketamine assisted psychotherapy, or the ketamine as you're doing it with your significant other, then makes it into this kind of, let's see beyond what we've like narrowly, the default mode network only lets in a small bandwidth. We're gonna open up that default mode network. We're gonna let the orchestra, instead of being tightly conducted by the conductor, we're gonna let the orchestra do jazz for a while and improvise and just allow the music to flow. And so you let, whatever wants to emerge. Some things are very revealing, some things are very healing, some things are a little bit, shocking maybe at times, or kind of revelatory. And that's why it's good to have a therapist there to go, okay, you know, don't take on this other person's, angst as if it's yours, it's theirs, let them work through their own birth. And, I really feel at the very best, I'm a spiritual midwife, for the soul. And that's really what I do. And I'm helping people through their own birth pains of coming into alignment with their true and authentic self. And we have so many layers of stuff that just we don't feel like we have agency. We've lost touch with who we really are. We lose ourselves in other people, in relationship and codependency and all of that. So, at the very best, the ketamine with couples can kind of, get through the layers of all of that and help them to come into a sense of their own agency, their own power, their own authenticity, and then share from that space in a more real and authentic way. And there's a magic that happens in that moment where there's a connection, a vibration, a healing that resonates at a very deep level.
So let's dive into a little bit more around this concept of soul work.
Mhm.
Okay, give us kind of take us do a little deep dive with us on soul work.
So, we have a body, we have a mind, and a spirit. And we talk about this, oh, we do holistic work. What does that mean? Body, mind, and spirit. And we do a lot with the body and we do a lot with the mind, but the spirit piece of it often is kind of like, well, that's just happens somehow. But it has to be more intentional in the soul work that I'm doing. And some of it, believe it or not, is really almost like soul retrieval. Like I am
I
so lost. I am so disconnected from the core of my being, my humanity, my soul. And that's where addictions thrive. That's why I work with a lot of people with addictions. And what do we need to recover? We need to recover their soul. They're almost like disembodied, empty vessels walking around, and they're not even in. It's almost like it's this palpable emptiness, and they feel it and they don't like it. It's not comfortable. Nobody wants to be kind of disconnected and kind of uh, no sense of connection or belonging. Connection and belonging are really important to us. And so the soul work is that work of getting back into alignment. And if we're using the 12 steps as a somewhat of a framework for that, which I do in the book, and I talk about recovery because there's that kind of gray area like, oh, if I'm in recovery and I use ketamine, does that mean I relapse? And it's not if you're using it therapeutically, no more than if you were using an antidepressant. That doesn't mean you relapse. You're just using a medicine to help you in your own recovery process. So in the steps, it says came to believe there is a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity. And so we lose ourselves and we lose that ability to think clearly and be sane. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to look very far to see, the kind of instability, emotional dysregulation, and unfortunately some of the insanity in the world. And so how do we, connect with that power greater than ourselves, make that soul to soul connection? I like to call it the beloved. How do we connect with the beloved? And how do we know that the beloved is in us and it loves us eternally, forever, exactly as we are in this moment? And when we know that, it fills our soul and we begin to heal that hole in the soul. And that's what happens. That's almost like a cup that's got a hole in the bottom of it. And no matter how much water you pour in that cup, it's not going to hold because there's a hole in the bottom of the cup. And that's what soul work is like. You have to heal the hole in the soul from the inside. And then your soul can hold the resonance of life and love and healing. And the beloved is more vibrantly a part of your existence.
Oh, perfectly stated. Now, again, everything's becoming more mainstream. Everything's being discussed more openly. People that in the past would never have considered putting their attention, let alone their intention, into working with some of these medicines are feeling drawn to it. There is no question that not everything is for everyone. And then also based on society and culture and everything spinning so much fear around these medicines that people are approaching them with some fear. But with your framework and everything, it would seem difficult for me to believe that people could really hold on to fear going in. How do you address this when someone comes to you and says, well, I'm interested, but
Yeah. Well, we have to find out what they're afraid of. And in my experience, with psychedelic medicine, and remember, psyche is soul, right? Psyche means soul, soul or mind manifesting. So, so we have to look at what is the fear that is really, underneath the surface. In my experience working with hundreds of people, it's control. It's pure and simple. It's control. And the thing that people fear the most is loss of control. And so they're trying to hold on. They're trying to white knuckle it through to life, through their existence. And it's horrible. And they use more and more. I mean, I cannot tell you, I have to beg people to be very cautious because doctors routinely give their patients Xanax. And Xanax is a very powerful benzodiazepine that is highly addictive. And the withdrawal from Xanax is horrible. I have had adult clients in treatment who were ready to jump out of their skin because they were trying to get off of Xanax. And you go to the doctor and you tell the doctor, I'm feeling anxious and I can't sleep. And the doctor says, oh, here's some Xanax.
Right.
Now, never indicating that, within a very short period of time, their brain is going to be acclimated to the Xanax and they're going to have to take more and more and more Xanax in order to get the same effect. And it's so, you know, the fear is being out of control. So they use a Xanax so they feel like they can kind of turn the volume down on that fear for temporarily, never dealing with the root issue of what the heck am I really afraid of? And why am I afraid of losing control? And where did that come from? And does that even belong to me? Or is that generational fear? And if it is generational fear, where did it go? And so we got to go back generationally. I cannot tell you how many people I have worked with where that fear was a fear of death, right? But once we went back into their generations, and if you go back, and for one example that was really poignant is, a client whose parents were in Nazi Germany. So actually, it was her grandparents. Her grandparents were in Nazi Germany at the time where their fear of death was palpable each and every day. It wasn't something. And so that got so ingrained into the family. Like you have to act and perform and be a certain way. Otherwise, you could be called out and you could be executed. You could be sent to the prison camps. And so generationally, she was so fearful and so controlled and so anxious. Once we got to that and she saw the whole big picture, this was my grandparents' fear that they passed it on to my mother, and then my mother passed the same fear on to me. We're talking about 75 to 100 years of fear and control. So we had to go back generationally to see where the root of that fear came from. That's how I work with people. I'm looking for the root. I'm going all the way back to where did this start? Because it doesn't make sense. The level of fear and control that you have, it doesn't relate to the situations that you're in today, but it feels that intense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And ego plays a big role because the ego, I mean, that's kind of from my perspective, it's the ego that wants control. And then psychedelics are, so much of psychedelics as medicine has to do with dissolving the ego. I like to say sidelining the ego. I don't think we ever get rid of the ego or anything like that, but there's a time and a place. And
Yes.
so have you had people that have been very, very challenged to the point of having a bad trip or something like that? Or because of your skill and expertise as a therapist, you're able, maybe the bad trip whole scenario is when they don't have the support and the guidance and the framework and everything going into it. Speak to us of that, because so many people, have this idea of like, oh, bad trip, you're going to take something one
Mhm.
time and oh, it's going to be terrible. You're never going to be the same. You actually mentioned that phraseology in the book where you're never going to be the same. And you're like, that's actually a true statement, but not
Yes.
meaning exactly what you think it means.
Yes, I did. Exactly. Because you won't be the same because it just shifts your perception. So I use this analogy of a bus, and there's a variety of parts of us that are on the bus. And so what's really important, I mean, there's a child part, an adult part, there's a part of us that's fearful, a part of us that's anxious, a part of us that's spontaneous and free, and a part of us that's more childlike, and a part of us that's wounded, and a part of us that may be codependent or addicted, the addict part. So what really makes the difference is who's driving the bus. Okay. And if fear is driving the bus, then you know what kind of ride you're going to have. And so by kind of looking and I've done the IFS, the internal family systems, and I've studied with Dick Schwartz, and I understand this is kind of my own little simplified way to kind of make it really practical very quickly, because then people can ask themselves that clarifying question, who's driving the bus right now? You know, and if you've got that scared little kid part of you that's been traumatized driving the bus, it's all survival mode. It's all just, oh my gosh, something bad is going to happen, and it's panic, and then the choices become more limited because that's the part that's driving at that moment. But if we can understand the parts of ourselves, if we can come to recognize if a part is taking the wheel, and we can then have other parts of us that we can bring in, like a nurturing, loving parent part of us. Like my good mom can come up and, put her hand on little Gay Lynn's shoulder and say, "It's okay. I got you. You're not alone. This is an old fear, and I'm not going to let anything bad happen to you. And I'm going to put you with good people who love you and care for you." And so little Gay Lynn can go, "Okay, okay, okay, I'm breathing again. I'm safe." And she can kind of step back, and the more mature, emotionally intelligent part of myself can take the wheel of my life. And a lot of it's learning, how do I navigate my inner world? How do I navigate the parts of myself? How do I know who's driving at any particular time? And that I can kind of stop and take a breath and understand how to switch out or support myself in my own inner world. And I'll tell you, and you know this, Dr. Dream, the most important conversation we're having with it all day long is the one we're having with ourselves.
Right.
That's it. We're having that self dialogue, that internal self talk is going to make the biggest difference. And sometimes people's internal self talk is so negative and so fearful and so, like doom and gloom. It's like, well, no wonder your external experience is reflecting that to a certain degree. So we have to
Right.
really pay attention and take ownership of our own thoughts and our own words and our own, what are we creating? Because this is a co-creative experience. And I'm creating along with a creator, creatress, the beloved. And what kind of life am I co-creating with the beloved?
Now, I know that you highly suggest that people that are going to be traversing these realms have an experienced facilitator, therapist with them. What do you say to someone who's in an area where it's like, that's just not going to happen, but I still want to do this? Is the book itself enough to take people through a process where then they can have an experience on their own if they happen to have access to the medicines or whatever? Or, I mean,
I wouldn't necessarily recommend anybody doing it alone ever, for a variety of reasons. One, if you get into distress, you need somebody to be able to call help, if you need it, or get you help if you need it. For example, at times, and this is like a more of an outlier, let's say this person is really like you talked about, like a bad trip. And this isn't a bad trip, it's just a part that of there was a session I was doing, and there was a part of this person who wanted to die, who wanted to not be existing anymore, and who was very suicidal. All right. So in that case, you really, I I have the experience of knowing how to navigate those suicidal ideations. If you're with somebody who doesn't know how to navigate that and they freak out and they don't know how to handle, oh my gosh, they want to die, and they're talking about how they're gonna, they want to end their life or something. If you can't navigate that, then both of you get in trouble, right? So that's where experience really plays a role. And I have had experiences of talking to the part that is self-destructive and self-sabotaging. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And you got to know what it's like doing micro surgery. You got to know what you're doing, because otherwise you could, like trigger some unintentional outcomes that you don't really. And just saying to somebody, oh, you don't want to do that to yourself. You don't really want to die. That could evoke a even stronger response from that person. Well, yes, I do. And so if you don't know how to navigate, suicidal ideations, or a part of the self that's really self-destructive or self-sabotaging, and know how to pair it with a part that can navigate internally. And I've had to do that. I've had to help people navigate internally that self-destructive part, and ask for another part to come forward and help, and not have them not decline, or try to talk them out of that, but have them navigate it internally, so they didn't want that to happen anymore. And that's another whole level of sophistication of being able to
Right.
do this work. So, and a lot of people have a self-sabotaging part of themselves. And so you've got to learn how to navigate with the self-saboteur, and internally be able to go, okay, so you don't want to be here anymore. Is there another part that maybe wants to be here, that can have some dialogue with a part that doesn't want to be here anymore? And you could start an internal dialogue and strengthening them from the inside out. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's an
absolutely.
internal healing process where they strengthen their own soul, being, humanity from the inside. And all of this work is all done as within, so without. It's in
Right.
every spiritual pathway teaching. If we can do it within ourselves, it can happen and manifest without. As above, so below. So that's the pathways that you have to be able to navigate.
Even just that answer to the question really shines a light on what is a foundational piece of the book, which is better safe than sorry. And really recognizing all the possible pitfalls or challenges, and taking a look at as much of that as possible beforehand, and then having a professional, having someone there that is prepared. And
Hmm.
so, also for the person um, that's looking at doing this, that it helps take a lot of the fear out. Also, it's like, okay, I'm in good
Yes.
hands.
Yes.
Share with us some highlight stories if you can. That I mean, hundreds of people that have gone through experiences with you and everything. I'm sure that I mean that could be a whole series of books on its own. But give us some ideas of some of the people that have benefited the most, or the more like more profoundly possibly than others.
Yes, I remember one particular woman I was working with who was really had a chronic alcohol issue. And, she had tried a variety of ways to, get over her, do the program, do treatment and all of this, and none of it was taking hold until we did a particular ketamine session. It was one of her very first ketamine sessions. And she had, and this is what I think is really significant about this work. It's not predictable. It's not like pushing a button and you're going to get a certain, this is going to happen to everybody. But she had that white light experience that Bill W. had. And she knew in that instant that she was connected to God. And so, in the story of Bill W., he was struggled with alcoholism his entire life, and then he went into treatment, and he was detoxing with what was used was belladonna, and it is a form of a psychedelic. They used it to help with the detox, and he had that white light experience. And from that moment on, he never had alcohol again. That was it. He knew he was connected. He knew knew he was loved. He knew that light permeated him and it came from something greater than himself and that he was always connected to that. And he did try over the years because he found psychedelic medicines, including LSD, to be very helpful for him in treating his depression because he stayed clean and sober his entire life, but he still was seeking how to lift himself out of this kind of unresolved depression that just kept lingering. And he used psychedelic medicines and found some relief in that, brought it back to the people in, in this movement that he started. And they said, no, Bill, we're not going to go there. This is just sober and period. And, but now we're revisiting that. And this woman had that experience where, and all she kept saying over and over again was, oh God, you love me, you love me. Oh God, you love me. And she had never had that profound experience before. And so it was as I say, this doesn't happen all the time, but for her, she didn't go back to alcohol again. That was it. That was her moment. And really, sobriety is really in terms of anything. And we're not just talking about alcohol and drugs. We have, addictions to porn that's so prevalent today. At every age, we have addictions to the, gaming, which is prevalent at every age. So, and besides food and all the ingestive types of addictions that you could have as well. But at the core of each of them is this spiritual bankruptcy, is this sense of disconnect, of this emptiness, and looking to fill it in some way, shape, or form. And so, at their very best, in my opinion, psychedelic medicines, including ketamine, can help us connect to that power greater than ourselves, and it can heal us from the inside out of that spiritual bankruptcy that many are experiencing. And that, I think, is the greatest gift. And there's a mystical component to that, and they have quantified that mystical component. And so that's the frontier that we're on right now. How can we open ourselves to the mystery, to the mystical, to that non-ordinary state of consciousness that really is where our healing, or at least a part of it, a great part of it, lies?
Beautiful. Now, from your perspective and everything and obviously living here in the United States, what do you see as the future for psychedelics as medicine?
I put a vision of that in the back of the book. I think it's going to affect us in terms of our relationship to the environment. I think it's going to affect us in our relationships globally to each other. I think it's going to affect us in our relationship to ourselves and to understanding that we are not separate. At some level, there's a a unification that we have to come to know. And we're either going to come to know it, in crisis, which I hope it's not, or we're going to come to know it through enlightenment in some way. And I'm hoping, my vision is that psychedelic medicines can be that pathway to enlightenment, and that we will know our oneness, and we will know our wholeness and our holiness, and we will know the beloved, and we will know that no matter who we are loved and we are connected. And that, I think, is the biggest promise that is so encouraging for me, and I'm doing it one starfish at a time. I mean, I'm a starfish thrower. I'm one woman, but I can, maybe I can help this starfish and throw this one back, and help this starfish and help that one back. And the book is a part of my starfish throwing. Maybe I can put the book out there, and they will, whoever is needing this will find it, and they will deepen their own healing experience. They'll deepen their own connection to something greater than themselves. They'll deepen their sense of being a part of the beloved and their inner healer. And then that replicates itself again and again and again. And then we hit that quantum, at some point, hopefully, that well, back in the day we used to call the 100th monkey, right?
Right,
We'll
right.
hit the 100th monkey, and that everybody will be, oh, I see how this works. I see how we can, make this easier for all of us. And, we're looking for that lift in consciousness. And Plato did experience this with the Eleusinian mysteries, and they experienced it as a community. And I see those communities kind of bubbling up in a variety of places so that they can have that experience, and that experience can share that energetic field and lift us all up. And again, at its best, that's what I see the psychedelic medicines in this movement potentially being able to do, besides getting through anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, and all of that. It's the micro and the macro.
Well, beautiful vision, Gay Lynn. I so appreciate that. Um, the book, absolutely fabulous. It's would be on the top of my list of books to read, or to suggest someone read if they are at all interested in this subject, or are delving into it already. So I'm so thrilled that we met you 2 years ago. I'm so thrilled
Thank you.
that Stephanie found the postcard that you had handed us, and it's just perfect. I'm yeah, so much honor and respect for all that you're doing, all that you've done, and your dedication and commitment that ripples and just is creating um, healthier people and a better world. And so thank you so much
Thank you.
for being a guest on Psychedelics as Medicine. And I could literally, I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh boy, normally I don't have the interviews go this long, but I could
Yep.
literally talk to you for hours more. You are
Yes.
that fascinating. And
Thank you.
I'm
And people
grateful.
can reach me too they can go to gaylin.net. That's a real easy way, just my name, gaylin.net. Psychotherapy and doing that basic kind of foundational work is something I do with all people every day. I have a full-time practice. I'm doing this day in and day out. I'm a practitioner. And so I'm in full, I have, if folks want to be prepared for the work or do the work, I am available for that and to help them with their counseling to prepare them to do the work and to prepare facilitators and teachers as well. So all of that is, again, my gift that I give to the world, and my hope that, to take this to the next step.
Now, let me ask, does someone have to be in Florida to engage your services, or are you doing any distance work with people over Zoom or anything like that?
Yes, I do distance work with people over Zoom, especially if it's the educational component to help prepare them. If it's counseling, it's usually in the state of Florida because I'm licensed in the state of Florida. But I have had people travel from all over the world to come to my office. And when they come to my office and they're in Florida, we can do the work together. So,
Fabulous.
that's how we can work that through. So I'm available to work with people from wherever they are.
Well, you're more than worth a trip to Florida for sure. We will look
Thank you.
forward to stopping into Ocala and seeing you when we're there next. Thank you so much
Yes.
for your
Thank you.
time and your information and everything. Yeah, so appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Dream. My pleasure. And I'll keep thinking of you every time I play that beautiful Tibetan bowl in my ceremonies. Thank you.
Warms my heart. Thank you. Have a great day.